name's Tonio Pedisano. Most people in the industry call me Tony O, the nickname that I achieved over the years. And I had the good fortune of being Don Rickles' manager. I worked with Don for 24 years, and I also had the good fortune of working for about 12 years with Frank Sinatra. Don Rickles held a lot of positions in my world. I first met Don in 1980. I was under contract at Harrison Lake Tahoe working in the State Line Cabaret. He was working in the main showroom, obviously. And we hit it off. The man was an iconic legend, a pioneer in comedy. And people are still, to this day, trying to emulate what he did. The other part of it is that he truly became family, extended family to me. And we were very close, and I miss him terribly. He's only been gone 6 years, but it seems like a lot longer than that. We had a lot of laughs together, and we shared a lot of very, very important emotional times together. He was always there for me, and I tried to always be there for him. In keeping with who Don was, there was no one who was out of bounds or off limits to be made fun of. Thankfully, a lot of people in the industry, all my show business friends, Jimmy Kimmel, Saget, John Stamos, the long list, they all adopted and loved my mom, whose name was Rose. And they all nicknamed her Mama Rose. So, and invariably, whenever she was in Las Vegas, when I was there with Rickles, somehow he would find out that my mother was in the audience. And this particular night, just to show you that no one was off limits, he said, and my manager's mother is in the audience, Tonio Pedisano's mom, Mama Rose, a former Broadway hooker. And he said, being Italian, she's a very, very good cook. And her biggest claim to fame is that she was the master chef at the Mussolini hangings. True story. I had the good fortune of being Don Rickles' manager and Frank Sinatra. I actually had them working together as frequently as we could, depending on the size of the venue. So this particular trip, Frank's jet flew up from Palm Springs to pick Don and me up at Van Nuys Airport. We flew to St. Louis, police escort. We opened the Kiel Center. Back in the jet, flew on to Chicago. 2 days later, we were to open the United Center. Check into the Ambassador Hotel, which was Frank's favorite. And we go downstairs to the famous pump room to have a late supper. It was about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And Frank and I were sitting with our backs to the wall with Barbara Sinatra. And on the other side of the table was Don Rickles and his wife, Barbara. And they brought Frank a minute steak and some French fries and a brand new bottle of ketchup. And he unscrews the top, and he's trying to get the ketchup to come out. Nothing's coming out. Now he's hitting the bottle, and people are looking like, uh-oh, Frank might be getting into a bad mood. So I said, you know, Frank, if you stick your butter knife in the ketchup, I got this, Tony. I got this. Okay. So now he's banging the bottle on the table, and he's hitting it, and he's making all kinds of noises, and people were really terrified that maybe he had gotten into a bad mood. So Frank realized that everyone at the table was looking at him, and he just casually picked up the bottle of ketchup, threw it over his shoulder against the wall. It broke, and there was ketchup running down the wall behind us. I kicked Rickles under the table, and I went like this, and he looked over at Frank, and he says, Frank? Yeah, Don. Can you pass the ketchup? Frank threw his drink at him, and everyone laughed. Yeah. We were in New York working at Radio City Music Hall, along with Sinatra. And we were going to a restaurant that Don loved to go to on the Upper East Side, and Barbara adored this place. So we pull up in front of the restaurant, and as I'm opening the car door of the limousine, getting Don out, a homeless man walked up to the car, and I started to approach him, and Don grabbed my arm, like, leave him alone. So this gentleman approached the car, and he said, Mr. Rickles, I'm a big fan, and I'm in a little bit of a jam. Could you see your way clear to help me out? Give me a couple of bucks. And Don said, oh, absolutely. And he reached into his pocket, and he peeled off a couple of $100 bills, and he hands it to this guy, and he says, now go buy yourself a ranch. Guy walks away. We go into the restaurant, have dinner, come out about 2 hours later, and the limousine pulls up, and we're walking to the car, and this same homeless guy approaches us, and Mr. Rickles, and he says, yeah. He said, listen, now that I have a ranch, do you think maybe you could lend me a couple of more hundred? I need to buy some cattle. P.S. Don gave him some more money.
That's awesome.
1998, we were on the Warner Brothers lot. Don and Betty White were playing Mr. and Mrs. Wilson in the making of Dennis the Menace 2.
He doesn't act his age.
Neither do you, George. You act much older.
And there was a scene which called for Don's character to be pushed into a wheelbarrow full of cement. He knocked it out of the park. Terrific. I said, Don, the golf cart's here to take us back to the trailer. You know, Tony, I want to talk to Charlie Kanganis, the director. 10 minutes later, he comes back to the trailer. Everything's fine, not a word. 2 days later, I get onto the lot early, and I walk into the trailer, and there's a manila envelope waiting on a table with Don's handwriting. Tony, this is for you. And I open it up, and it's this photograph. Picture of Don in a wheelbarrow full of cement, and it says, Tony, you are so Italian, it was a joke.
That's brutal.
You are watching Behind the Don. Please like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it. So would he. No one was off limits to Don Rickles, including Don Rickles. He calls me up on a Tuesday, and he says, Tony, I think we may have a problem. I said, what's the problem, Don? Well, you know, we're working Vegas this weekend, the Desert Inn. I said, yeah, I know. I just finished chartering the jet. What's the problem? Well, we're flying home Sunday night after the show, like always. I said, absolutely. Oh, good, because I have to go to the doctor's office early in the morning on Monday. He wants to run some tests, but the doctor said I can't have any alcohol this weekend. Now, you're talking about a man who used to have at least 2 vodkas in the dressing room before he went on stage. Now you're talking about a man who can't have any alcohol. I said, Don, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Thankfully, he had no idea that O'Doul's is a non-alcoholic beer. So we get to the dressing room, and it's fully stocked with O'Doul's. And I said, listen, it's not vodka, it's not Kettle One, but at least you can have a couple of beers. Oh, okay. So we get ready to do the show, and there was a bit during the show that Don used to do, Yankee Doodle Dance. He would do this whole dance bit and everything else. And at the end of it, he would dance off into the wings, and I'd be waiting there for him with a towel. So this night, opening night, he's doing the show. He's just about finished with Yankee Doodle Dandy, and he runs off into the wings, and I'm standing there with a towel, and he throws himself in my arms. Oh, Tony. Oh, jeez. Oh, Tony. Oh, my God, help me. I said, Don, what's the matter? I haven't heard my act in 20 years. I stink. And then naturally he looked up at me and he laughed. We were doing a tour down in Florida with Joan Rivers, and Barbara Rickles came with us on almost every tour. But this particular night, she decided to stay back at the hotel in Palm Beach. Show was great. On the way back, it's after midnight. Don says, you know, I don't think we should wait till we get back to the hotel to eat. Maybe we should stop someplace on the road. I said, well, okay. I told the driver, Kevin, I said, you know, 2 more exits and there's a Denny's. Don says, what's that? I said, you'll like it. It's like a coffee shop. He's never been to a Denny's in his life. So we pull in the stretch limo in the parking lot. And I walk into the Denny's and I go over to the manager. I said, listen, I have Don Rickles in the car. We'd like to grab a bite to eat. I said, could you put us someplace out of the way? He says, oh yeah, I'll bring you into a section of the restaurant that's closed so nobody will bother you. I said, terrific. So we go inside. Don, myself, his buddy Harry, and the driver sit down, and Don is going absolutely crazy because Barbara was not there to stop him from eating things that he normally would love to have eaten, and she wouldn't let him. So he was having a blast. Okay. About an hour later, we're all finished eating, and Don says to me, why don't you, go get the check and make sure. I said, yeah, I'll have to take care of it later, don't worry about it. So I walked over to the manager and I said, listen, we're done. Can you bring me the check? Oh, there's no way. He said, I'm going to bring a check to Don Rickles' table. The nail is on me. It's all comp. He said, but can I ask you for a favor? I said, sure. He said, would it be okay for me to come over to the table and meet Don and maybe take a picture? I said, absolutely. So he comes over, I introduced the 2 of them, and Don was very respectful. And the manager says, so let me ask you, you've never been to a Denny's before, how was the food? And Don looks at me and he looks back at the manager and he picks up the menu and he says, my compliments to the photographer. We get on the lot, CBS Radford, to go on Hot in Cleveland. He did 2 episodes. We're in his dressing room, and I said, you know what? Let me go to the soundstage and make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be before I bring you over there. And I walked over, and there was Betty White, and she, oh my God, Tony, how are you? I hadn't seen her in like 5 years. She comes running over. She gives me a big kiss, and I said, you know, Betty, I got to show you something. I was just looking at these last night, and I was happy. I can't wait to show them to you. And I showed her some pictures of she and I on the set from 1998. And she says, oh my God, look how great we look. Look at that. She says, we look fantastic. What happened to you? I said, look at this. She turned into Don Rickles right in front of me. What happened to you? I am Tony O, and this has been Behind the Don. Please like and subscribe. We would appreciate it. And so would Don. Trust me. Just moved. You didn't tell me.
I'm sorry.
You creep.